My mom was diagnosed with a brain tumor. I had to choose between my job or my mom, and of course, I was going to choose my mom.
I had to take my dad off of life support while I was at work. At the time, I didn't have paid time off. I have a customer yelling at me, you know.
Every day, people in the United States are being forced to make an impossible choice between going to work or caring for themselves or their loved ones.
I was working the day that the twins were delivered via cesarean section and up through 2 months after their birth.
Pretty sure I cried the first week of daycare drop-off, and it just broke my heart, you know, every time that they cried for me as I handed them off.
I had a completely unpaid maternity leave. I ended up having to start a GoFundMe just to make rent and other expenses, especially medical expenses.
This is one of the only countries in the world that doesn't guarantee paid maternity leave.
I hope we don't get sick. I hope that I don't get sick.
And one of a few wealthy countries without paid sick leave.
The toll that it takes on the whole family is extreme.
Not having a paid leave led to us filing bankruptcy. We still struggle.
Postpartum was really rough, so I ended up taking about.
For millions of Americans, going through a crisis or a life change with no paid time off can have devastating consequences.
Paid family leave would literally mean everything to me.
It's really just discouraging and emotionally very difficult for us.
It has to change. Everyone has a breaking point, you know? And I don't know when I'm gonna hit mine, but I'm afraid that it's dangerously soon.
What'd you say? What'd you say?
I had had 3 miscarriages before I had Shepherd, and so he was just really special to Derek and I.
What do you want to do today?
I'm sure every parent thinks this, but I mean, he was very wanted. We thought we were gonna get to keep him and watch him grow up.
Allie's son Shepherd would have been 5 this year. Her daughter Esme is 3.5, and Presley's 9. In 2015, when Shepherd was 2.5 months old, Allie got a call from his daycare, asking her to rush back. Shepherd had stopped breathing.
That day, she ended up swaddling Shepherd, putting him in another kid's car seat, and then put the car seat on the floor in another room and shut the door, and she didn't check on him for over 2 hours. And she found him blue.
Doctors advise against putting babies to sleep in car seats, saying it increases the risk of SIDS, or sudden infant death syndrome.
And then I met them at the hospital, where I watched them continue to perform CPR on Shepherd and finally pronounced him dead, so.
This is pretty much like every mother's nightmare.
Yeah. It's just a gamble and a risk that I don't think that any family should have to take. I think our babies should be older and stronger.
Allie had only been back at work for a week.
How much time do you think families should have?
6 months. That would be my utopia. 90% of infant deaths happen by 6 months. Like, let moms and dads share that 6 months, or go back and forth, or give them flexibility, but give them 6 months.
Allie is a physical therapist. She says she didn't have paid maternity leave through her job. She thought she'd get 12 weeks off, unpaid, through the federal law known as FMLA, or the Family and Medical Leave Act. But she didn't even qualify for that because her office had fewer than 50 employees. Allie eventually got 11 weeks of unpaid leave, but she says it's only because her boss advocated for her.
He's the only reason. Because all I qualified was for, it's called a leave of absence. So I could have just had 30 days with Shepherd versus almost 11 weeks.
To make the most of her time off, Allie even decided to have Shepherd early.
I got induced because I was like, I'm done like using up my leave, basically. I wanted my newborn with me at my house. I wanted to get to know and bond with my baby. I didn't want to be pregnant any further into that time where I had agreed that I would be gone.
That's just a pretty crazy calculus to sit there while you're pregnant and make that decision.
Every family in America makes that decision. Every single one.
It's not a little better? You want me to kiss it again? Better? Yeah. I think it's better.
Good job, bud. That was good.
Pedal too early.
Oh, it's okay. You can try again. Practice, practice, practice.
10, 20, 30.
Allie's husband, Derek, is a school teacher. He'd planned to spend his summer off taking care of baby Shepherd.
We only needed a few weeks of care to get to summer, and Shepherd never made it.
That's okay. Mommy can help.
He died April 6th. We only needed to get to the end of May, and then he would have been home with Derek, and Derek would have finally gotten some time alone with his little boy. He never got that.
That next week or so was just like a blur. Press, he was 4 at the time. As hard as going to the hospital was, the harder part was having to go pick Press up and tell him that his brother had died. That's the hardest thing I've ever had to do, is look a 4-year-old in the face and tell him that his little brother's not coming home.
Do you think if you had more time off, Shepherd would still be alive?
If there's a few things that I know, is that if my child had been with me that day, I'd still have 3 kids. I know it. There's literally not a family in the United States that this policy wouldn't touch. We're behind the entire world on this issue. We're behind in supporting our families. We're just terribly, awfully, embarrassingly behind. We are.
Family and medical leave has always had the support of a majority of Americans from every part of the country, from every walk of life, from both political parties. It took 8 years and 2 vetoes to make this legislation the law of the land.
1993 was the last time the U.S. tried to pass a comprehensive federal policy for workers to take time off, either to care for a loved one or themselves. That was almost 30 years ago.
Now millions of our people will no longer have to choose between their jobs and their families. Today, all of us.
But millions of Americans are still having to make this choice. About 40% of workers don't qualify for FMLA, and because it's unpaid, even people who do qualify often can't afford to take it.
So first, I just wanted to say welcome and thank you for being here.
In February, these workers went to Congress to lobby for a more comprehensive paid leave law.
On average, I lose $5,000 a year through leave or pulling from my pension, my future, to care for my mother. I don't use my leave to get my mammograms. I don't use my leave to go to a dentist. I use my leave to care for my mother.
My baby wasn't going to be afforded the most important time of brain development because in order to keep a roof over our heads, I had to work. There was no choice. That was the first time I ever felt unlucky to live in the United States of America. A civilized country would never do that to its own people.
The United States has fallen behind in terms of the kinds of public policies that address the economic needs of families today. Both men and women are in the workforce. People get sick. Other countries have understood this. They've understood it with regard to pay equity, paid sick days. The United States is behind the curve.
We need to just seize the moment.
Representative Rosa DeLauro has been working on this issue for the last 40 years.
I introduced the Family Act.
She's now co-sponsoring a Democratic-led bill called the Family Act. which would offer up to 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave for most workers.
It creates an independent, a self-sustaining national insurance fund by having employees and employers pitch in together with payroll contributions of 2 cents for every $10 in wages. It is equivalent to less than $2 per week for a typical worker. It's workable. And you know why it's workable? California, New York, New Jersey, 8 states, plus the District of Columbia have moved in this direction, and it is working.
So why do you think we still don't have federal paid family leave?
When we first did family and medical leave, the view was that this was not sustainable. Business community couldn't do this. It would put them out of business. That was hogwash. Today, recognized as something that is important, it's good, and no one went out of business because of it. And that's the argument we get today on paid family leave.
Polls show that most Americans across the political spectrum support the idea of paid family and medical leave. But many Republican lawmakers don't think the government should mandate it.
Companies are competing for workers and voluntarily expanding benefits for their employees because of the tax cuts, not because of any mandate from the federal government.
I mean, it sounds wonderful, but we all know at the end of the day, there's nothing free, and at some point, there's a lot of costs associated with this.
There's 2 main points of contention. One is who's covered, what range of conditions are covered, and the other is how do you pay for it? And I would say a third emerging issue is what is the proper role of the private sector versus government and a public program. But the unseen costs of not having paid leave are numerous. Whether it's measured in women's reduced wages or a loss in retirement savings and income over time, whether we're thinking about increased healthcare costs when people aren't able to take the time they need to get care and recover. There are big costs of doing nothing.
Zoe, come on, get up. Everybody should get it, no matter their education level, their job, no matter what. Everybody should get at least 6 months of paid leave, at least.
When Leah Clay gave birth to her baby, Royal, she says she didn't have any paid maternity leave through her part-time job. At first, she planned to take 3 months of unpaid leave to be with her baby.
I wanted to stay home, and I wanted to be able to spend some time with my baby. When they so young, like, you don't know, like, not to say that, like, people are evil and stuff, but she can't talk for herself in daycare. There ain't no telling what'll be going on. And then when it was time for me to go back, Royal, she's exclusively breastfed, so she wasn't taking a bottle, she wasn't doing anything. So at that point, I was like, okay, well, the hospital offered me 12 more weeks of baby bonnet time. So I said, okay, I'll take the extra time off.
But taking 6 months of unpaid leave took a financial toll on Leah. She had to go on government assistance.
It's very stressful. Like, being at the mercy of somebody else's money is stressful when I should be able to do everything for my kids by myself. Ma'am, go brush your teeth like I asked. As people figure it out, if she's on housing, then she's lazy or on drugs or something like that. To be on housing, you have to work. You have to have a job. You can't sit at home all day.
Is 6 months of leave unusual based on what you've seen of the women that you deal with?
Yes, it's very unusual. Even if it's offered, they just can't afford it.
According to one estimate, a quarter of women in the U.S. go back to work within 2 weeks of giving birth. As a breastfeeding counselor at a public hospital, Leah says she hears about this all the time.
What are you seeing in the mothers who've had to give birth and then go right back to work?
Stress, survival mode. Maybe that's why postpartum depression is so high, because they don't have the time to heal their body, heal your mind, heal feel their spirit at all, because pregnancy and birth, especially if their birth was traumatic, it affects all of that. Yeah, I tried to eat again, fellows. Here we go. This is their dad. He just passed.
Things got harder for Leah when she became a single parent. A week before she was supposed to go back to work, the girl's father died unexpectedly.
Me and their dad were attached at the hip. He was my everything.
Here. Is that Daddy down there?
Where? In the cloud?
There.
Right there? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Daddy. He looking at you. I think it's just now starting to hit me that he's really gone. It's really starting.
Mommy, we always call Daddy.
Me. I know, though. It's just hard trying to maneuver my life without him. It changed our dynamics a lot. So we split everything down the middle 50-50. And originally, one of our plans was for him to start working nights. He would stay home with Royal during the day, help me with Royal during the day so I can work. And then he would go to work at night. But now that he's gone, that's not even an option.
About 70% of Black women are the sole breadwinners in their families. And we know that 60% of women are co-breadwinners in their families. So when these families experience a shock on either side or on both sides simultaneously, if they have unpaid leave, they cannot afford to take care of their family. Nobody should have to win the boss lottery in order to benefit from something that helps them and their families attain economic security. About 75% of people take leave to care for their own health needs or for another loved one, whereas only 21% take it for paid parental leave. So we want a policy that covers all families' needs.
What? Hey, look! Oh my gosh!
Check.
When I thought about FMLA just as a kind of layperson, it just meant more like paternity or maternity leave. We've just been very fortunate that it had never been an issue until Joe got sick.
In June 2015, when Jacqui's son Joe was almost 3, she got a call from his daycare.
This is what they saw at daycare. So you can see he's all sweaty on that side, and it's just a very distinct line right down his face.
It almost looks like a sunburn on half the side of his face.
Right.
After a trip to the emergency room, Joe underwent a series of scans.
This was after his bone marrow biopsy.
He was diagnosed with neuroblastoma, a rare childhood cancer that develops in the nerve cells.
It's crazy to look at him now and think of that. I just remember I'd wake up in the mornings and I'd have a brief second where I didn't know, I didn't remember, and then it was just an elephant on my chest, and I just remember thinking, how am I going to function today? How am I going to take care of my 3 kids?
This is when I had cancer. I have thousands of pictures. This is me.
What is cancer?
Cancer is when we get hurt and have very much pain and go to the hospital. Hi, Grammy. Hi. How you guys doing? Good.
Jacqui's a school teacher. She took 3 months of unpaid leave through FMLA to be with her son.
But yeah, that's what radiation looks like.
When she realized how serious her son's condition was, Jacqui told her boss she couldn't go back to work anytime soon.
This is his last radiation treatment. We just had no choice. I had no choice. There was no way that I was going to leave him in the hospital alone.
A few months after taking unpaid leave, Jacqui lost her job.
This line just killed me. Thank you for your efforts on behalf of the children of the Andover Public Schools, and best wishes to you in all your future endeavors. If my kid is still in the hospital and you're leaving me without a job and without benefits, and that's the letter I get.
And so when you got that letter that day, what was going through your mind?
I did not know what I was going to do. I had to figure out how I was going to go back to work and get some benefits.
We reached out to the Andover Public School District for a statement. They told us Jacqui's case had been resolved, and they wouldn't release any additional information. Jacqui interviewed for jobs while Joe was still in the hospital.
12 weeks is still better than 0 weeks. I had to go back to work immediately after Joe was done with treatment. That's another place where that paid leave would have been so helpful, was just taking care of myself. My kid almost died. I have images of him burned into my brain, of him just attached to 8 different IV poles, and how can you expect someone to leave that experience and not be affected and not need time to heal?
It's been nearly 4 years since Joe was in treatment, but he still has to go to the hospital for checkups every 3 to 4 months.
Neuroblastoma is just, it's sneaky, and it hides places, and it can show up years out of treatment. So it's really scary to think about, you know, this could be over, or it might not be.
It's my bedtime.
It is. Hello. Hi, good, how are you? Oh, no, that's okay.
Jacqui got a call from Joe's oncologist about a recent scan.
Okay.
They found a spot on his liver.
It just puts you right back in that place. It brought me right back to June of 2015. Thankfully, what they think it is it's just this lesion that kids get, but he's gonna have to go in for another scan, another specialized MRI that I'll have to take another day off of work for. I just took 2 days off last week for his scans. But this is just something that's ongoing. It is never going to go away for us. And we just feel like we're really alone in it. I saw children in the hospital with cancer whose parents couldn't be there. And they were just left in charge of the nurses because the parents had to be at work. And it just haunts me. All right, what are we gonna snuggle to?
We shouldn't have to choose between what our instincts, our brains, our hearts are telling us, and between possibly losing our jobs.
Nobody should have to make decisions like that.
We often talk a good game about caring for our families and loving our neighbors and caring for our communities, and yet our public policies don't match up to that. If we really valued the contributions that people make, whether in their workplace or their home or in their community, we would have adopted paid family and medical leave a long time ago.
It's so hard for me to even wrap my head around that you would actually, somehow we would have this policy that would provide paid leave so that you could actually afford to offer that support to that aging family member or your kid with cancer, like, what a different world we would live in. What value we would place on every person's life.